morning, everyone, and welcome to our Creating, Editing, and Saving Views in StackVision webinar. I'm Taylor Hempel, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. Today, we have Mark Astudillo, ESC Spectrum's Educational Services Coordinator, here to explain how to create, edit, and save views and various StackVision features. Just a reminder to hold any questions you have until the end and type them in the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. After the presentation is over, I will read out the questions and Mark will answer them to the best of his ability. With that being said, let's begin.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Taylor, for that great introduction. I'm excited to be here with everyone for our Creating, Editing, and Saving Views webinar. We're going to cover a lot of ground this morning, and I hope you get some information that will help you better determine your views, your dashboards, and your consoles that will make your use of StackVision much easier. So this is going to be an overview of the functionality and the benefits of creating and using the views in the various areas of StackVision. There are actually 4 areas where a view can be used. A view is a customized display using any combination of filters, summaries, colors, or arrangements. And views can be used in the following StackVision feature areas. In CEMScape, we can create views by filtering out parameters and the associated network of parameters, easily filtering by using View a New Window and rearrange as desired. In the DataLab and the DataLab viewer tools, views and DataLab features can be customized in countless ways by being able to add different filters, add summaries, turning validity on, status, fields on or off, adding colors to correspond with specific flags, and more. With the active alarms can be filtered out by alarm status, alarm exceptions, source, parameter, or values. Consoles and dashboards can be used to see real-time parametric values or statuses of your digitals. You can also have controls on your consoles and dashboards that will allow you to perform different controller command functions, such as starting a calibration or opening or closing a digital output, or just seeing the status of a digital input. The dashboards offers the same type of options, but in the new window with the new client tool. In general, views can be user or shared. A user view is a private view, and a user view is only available when that person that created the view is logged into the StackVision server. However, if you're using a generic login, for example, everybody logs in using Operator or everybody logs in using Tech, then everyone that using that login will have access and be able to edit the view. A shared view or public view is one that is available to everyone who logs into the StackVision server. However, only the owner or the user who created the view will be able to edit or change the view in any way. Others may save the view under a different name and then be able to edit that view or change the copied view while the original view remains as it was created. Users with administrative access will be able to manage or administer all views, user and shared. What can the administrators do? They can change views from user to shared or vice versa. They can delete a view. They can change the ownership of the view. What users can do, you can only change the view that you have created or own. Under each of the feature areas that support views, additional folders can be added by selecting the feature area, right-click, and select Add New Folder. Folder names can be changed to a more descriptive name, and views can be dragged and dropped into those new folders. To create a view in CEMScape, follow these simple steps. Select the parameter for the view, right-click and select View a New Window, and use either rubber banding to select multiple parameters, or select a single parameter and move and rearrange. Or you can use Control S to save the view and save as either a user or a shared view. In the DataLab and DataLab viewer tool, we can begin by launching either tool. DataLab allows edits, and you need access to be able to launch DataLab. And the DataLab viewer does not allow any edits, and everyone has access to that. When the tool is launched, the Task Explorer will switch to display all available views. Click on the Parameters tab to enable source and parameter selection. In the example here, we see DataLab Viewer on the left with all the fields being grayed out or ghosted. And on the right, we see DataLab and we see the clear background. That lets us know that we can edit in those particular areas. Once the tool opens, you'll select the Parameters tab. Select the parameters that you wish to display. Set the dates and times of the time frame that you want to look for, and then click the Retrieve button. Date and time range is not saved as part of the view. Everything else that you set will be saved as part of the view, but the date and time range will not. So you will have to go in each time you run that view and just update the dates and times. The default view when you go into DataLab will be the crosstab view. You can change the views to click linear or chart down at the bottom tabs to change the views. The default view will offer you the most options for filters, fields, and summaries. To begin filtering, click on the filter icon at the top of the column. It's a little funnel-looking icon, and that will allow you to filter out what is in that particular column. All filters will offer the same basic options. If you select all, there's no filter applied. Custom, where you can select how to filter. Blanks to show only data fields that are blank, or non-blanks to show data fields that are not blank. Anything greater than 0. And for those fields that are either a check, true, or not checked, false. For example, you may see the missing column. If it is considered missing, it would have a check or be true. If it is not checked, it is not considered missing and it's false. To create a custom filter, you would select custom from the drop-down menu. Select any or all conditions that you wish to apply. Select an operand from the drop-down, add a value in the field, and to add another condition, click the Add button. For example, if you wanted to see everything in that particular column that was between the values of 10 and 12, you would start with a custom filter, select the value is greater than or equal to, then select your value, add a condition, and now do a less than or equal to 12. Once you've selected what you want to see, you select the OK button, and then the column will be filtered out for whatever you have selected. You can tell when you have a filtered icon because when you have a filtered column because the icon will turn blue. So we can see here, this icon, this column is filtered, and this column is not. To clear all the filters, we can either use the filter icon and select all in the individual column, or we can clear all filters using the icon in the toolbar to remove all applied filters to all columns. We can add summaries as well. There are two options to add summaries to the displayed data. Summaries are only available for parameter value columns. One, we're going to use the summary icon in the toolbar, and this will add all summaries to all columns. Or we can use the summary icon in the individual columns, and this will allow you to select which summaries you would like to add to your display. Different fields can be turned on or off for each of or all of the columns. When using the crosstab view, fields can be added to the individual columns by selecting parameters from the toolbar. Each parameter in the crosstab view can be expanded and fields can be selected. If using the fields option, selected fields will be applied to all columns. And that's important to know because you might want to look at just the missing for the CO2, but if you select fields and select missing, it's going to put it on every column. You can also add a little bit of color to your display. Colors can be turned on To indicate conditions associated with the data. To see the colors, click on the Show Colors icon on the toolbar. This will color the flag color with the associated priorities. You can also change the colors and the priorities by clicking on the Preferences icon, and then you can select which condition you want to have with which color. Only the highest priority condition will be displayed. Colors and priorities can be adjusted by selecting the flag, color drop-down, and select color. To change the priority, use the up and down arrows to move the selected flag. So in this particular example, we can see out of control has that yellow background, so that would be the highest priority. But if this particular reading happened to be out of control because we were in startup or shutdown, we would not see that as indicated in the color. However, if startup was more important to me than seeing out of control, I could select startup and then change the priority using the up and down arrows on the right-hand side. And here we have a view to save. In this particular example, we have filtered the CO2 out, the CO2 column, for only hours that are greater than 15 and less than 60. We have added a summary to the column for the CO2 to count the hours between 15 to 60. You can see we have 12 hours. The NOx high parameter is showing the minimum and maximum for the 12 hours that the CO2 was between 15 and 60. We have turned on colors, indicating that we have some fields that are out of control, some that were in maintenance, which is the green, and some which were in exceedance, which are the red. In addition to the filter and summaries, colors have been applied to indicate out of control, maintenance, and exceedance. Now we've added the reason and action codes just for CO2. So we've gone up to our parameters, opened up the CO2, and selected reason code and action code under permit, and now we can save our view. We can click the Save View icon on the toolbar, or we can go to File, Save View. We will have to name our view. If shared is checked, all users will have access. However, the user who created it will only be able to edit it. If you have made changes to a view that you own, you can save those changes by clicking on the Overwrite checkbox. Now on the Views panel, the newly created view can be recalled by double-clicking on the view name. To add a new folder to the branch, click on DataLab or other feature area to select. Right-click and select Add New Folder. Add a name for the folder, and then drag the desired views into the newly created folder. So to sum up the DataLab viewer, we're going to select our parameters. We're going to retrieve our data, apply selected colors and filters and summaries. Click on the Saved View icon and select whether we want it to be a user or shared view, and click on OK. The next feature area where we can have views applied is the active alarms. The active alarms panel can be filtered to have color applied to the displayed alarms. Just as in DataLab, filters can be applied to the columns. The same custom blanks, non-blanks, greater than 0, true, and false options are available. If we apply colors, we can quickly find particular alarms within the active alarm panel. In this example, we have filtered 354 alarms to find the 3 outstanding alarms associated with Cal Drift. We have also turned on the color preferences. You can filter for outstanding, return to normal, or acknowledged, which is the state of each of the alarms, a description of the alarm, the starting and ending date and time, the plant and source, a particular parameter, certain values, an interval, or return to normal or not return to normal. Colors can be turned on using the Show Colors icons, just like we saw in DataLab or the DataLab viewer. And then we can also select the alarm preferences to assign colors to those specific alarms. Colors can be assigned to more than one alarm. As an example, failed calibrations, drift limit warnings, and out of control alarms could all be colored red. Or those alarms that require immediate attention could all be colored red, while those that are colored green are just get to them when you get to them type alarms. When opening the active alarms, the Task Explorer will change to the Views panel. To open the view, select the view, click Load View button, or double-click to open. Just as in other feature areas, views will appear under the feature area where they were created under. New folders can also be added and named under the alarm branch. So for your alarms, we're going to filter for the status, the description, or parameter. We'll apply colors if we need to. Click to save our view icon, and then select User or Shared. The next area where you can use displays are on your consoles. Consoles and dashboards are pretty much in the same family. They will both show you statuses, they will both show you real times, but there are some differences between the views or the dashboards and the consoles. The console is part of the legacy of StackVision, where you can go in and you can build any console and arrange it how you need to. It is, however, a memory hog. So we have developed what is called the dashboards. When the consoles refresh, whether it's on an instant basis, meaning it's going to be real-time data, or a 15-minute basis, every item on that screen is going to be redrawn. You won't see it as the user looking at the screen, but in the background, everything is going to be refreshed. On the dashboards, that doesn't necessarily happen. It just updates what it needs to, and it doesn't eat up all that memory. So the dashboards are the way of the future, and we'll talk about those as well. The consoles provide an overview of the system conditions. The graphical icons create an easy-to-read display perfect for control room conditions. So at an easy, quick glance, you can look over there at the consoles. The consoles are built using the console designer and viewed using the console viewer. They must first be designed using the console designer. Once you've created a console and saved it, you can retrieve it through the viewer to see the active feeds of data and the system component statuses. When you're designing your console, you will not get any type of readings. So you won't get any indication of the parametric data or the status of digitals, anything like that. You will have to save that console and then launch it in the viewer to be able to see those fields. Dashboards, however, you don't have to go into the viewer mode. You can see them all as you're editing and building those. Console viewers for viewing the active consoles for real-time data and system conditions, and edits cannot be performed through the active console. So here we see an example of a console and all of the different components that can be used in a console. In the console designer, this is where we're going to build those consoles, and you can see in this example, there's no data being displayed, where when we looked at the viewer, we had data and statuses being displayed. You have a variety of images and gauges to build your specific console, and in the designer, you can fancy those up or change the way they look by using the Details tab available in the console designer. Consoles, just like views, can be either user-only or shared. Consoles can be found in the Options or the Views place in the pane in the Task Explorer. You can create subfolders again, remember, and you can just drag them and drop them in there. Something else that's quite important about views and consoles is they can be associated with a particular user. So when that user logs into StackVision, that view or that console or the dashboard will automatically load for that particular user. So here, if we're going to build our console, we select the interval that we want to look at in our console. We select our plant, we select our source, and then we drag that selected parameter to the grid and drop it on the grid. Each parameter can be displayed using one of the options there for the different grids and the different readings that you'll have coming in. So we can see over here on the left-hand side, we have a gauge, numeric simple gauge. We have a gauge 1 simple, that just looks like your regular typical gauge, or we have a gauge 2 simple, the same gauge, but now we've added the values at the bottom. We have a linear gauge, and on the linear gauge, we can change the colors going on that linear gauge from the default. Typically, it's going to be a green for good, and then we can decide where we want that component to turn yellow. So we can see here we have a 0 to 20% reading. Maybe from 0 to 8 is going to be green for a good reading. Maybe 8 to 12 might turn yellow, and then anything above 12 may go red. And again, it just depends upon how we set it and what we want to see on that particular gauge. You also have quality flags. The quality flags enable you to go ahead and set those quality flags up to see if a certain condition exists. When we talk about the conditions, we're looking at those things that will also be masked in the DataLab piece. So we have calibration, invalid, fault, maintenance, high, offline, out of control. And those quality flags will also change color depending upon the colors that we have associated with those. So earlier we saw where yellow was out of control. Well, in this particular quality flag, that would also turn yellow. However, the number backgrounds on each of the components will also change to be the highest priority of the color sequences. So let's say, for example, as we saw earlier, out of control was the highest priority. So then my background is going to turn red, or turn yellow rather. And what's going to happen with that is the background will turn yellow, but my quality flags would light up if I was in calibration or if I was in maintenance or something like that. So if it was out of control and I'm in maintenance, no worries, it's okay. Your digital input icons, you can have the status show on or off or a fault, and they can be displayed using any of the graphics. The default icon colors could be shown for green, red, or yellow, or you can use the graphics that are available to show a fan on or off, a boiler on or off, flames in the boiler, no flames in the boiler, so on and so forth. Controller commands can also be used to start or stop or abort calibrations or open or close digital outputs. One calibration can be assigned to a controller command button, but multiple outputs can be assigned to the controller command button. So if I want to use these buttons for starting cals, I'm going to have one button for each calibration. However, let's say, for example, you want to have it where your digitals 1, 3, and 5, when they get closed, that means your system goes into maintenance. Well, you can associate one button to open or close digitals 1, 3, and 5. You can also change the way the buttons look. You can have them having text in the center, to the right, to the left, underneath. You can also change the way the view the button looks, a play button, a stop button, an open or closed switch. You also have some miscellaneous stuff that you can put out there on your console. You have a text box. In the text box, you can change the fill color, the border styles, and the font style and size, or you have some default stacks that you can drag out and just drop on the screen. And no, you cannot have a stack out there that shows somebody falling off the stack. That, you can't do that. But there are just some stock images there for your console. You can also add a custom graphic, and this custom graphic can be a BMP, it could be a JPEG, a GIF file, PNG, and to add this custom graphic, all you're going to do is drag Add Custom and drop it on the grid. When you do that, what's going to happen is a browser window or a browse window will open to say, where do you want me to get this custom graphic from? You'll select where to get that graphic, what the graphic is, and then it will be pulled into your database for that particular console. Be careful when you do this though, because everyone will now have access to your custom graphic. So if you don't want everybody being able to put your 1957 Chevy that's your pride and joy as a background on their console, don't use it because it will be available for everybody. So you want to be careful with that. We can also add a trending container, and this can trend data over a period of time. We're going to drag and drop the trending container onto the console, and then we will select the intervals and the parameters to trend. In the trending container, we can trend multiple parameters and multiple intervals. An example of this might be the need to trend 1 minute CO2 and the 15-minute NOx data. Both can be added to the same trending container. The period to display or look back period can also be set. Other options include being able to change the parameter trend line color and graph minimum and maximum. If you change the graph minimum and maximum on the console, it does not impact the settings that have been made in Stack Studio for the graph minimum and maximum. It's just for that particular trending container. General details for your console. Each console object can be customized using the Detail tab. And each of these can be customized the way you want them, and it's WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. If you save the console and everything is blown up and expanded to 300% view, that's what's going to come back. You can change the background color by clicking in a blank area of the console and then changing the color under the Details tab. Is it user or shared? Like views, consoles can be user only or shared. We can go into our views administration and manage the consoles under the views administration tool, where we can change ownership, change the status, or delete the consoles. And finally, with our consoles, we can import and export them. We can export them as an XML file, extensible markup language, and then import it into another server. We can use an XML editor to make changes to the corresponding file with the server that it's being imported to. So for example, let's say that I've got a plant 100 miles away and they've just got the best console I've ever seen in the world. Well, we can export that out of their server, bring it back to our site, and import it into our server and just make the applicable changes. Next, we have our dashboards, and this tool was introduced in a beta version in StackVision 5.2, and it has matured in each version going forward. This dashboard tool resides in a separate window, much like when we launched the cylinder management tool or the logbook. This opens up in a separate window. So we can go to Tools, Dashboards, and that's going to open up in a new window, the Dashboard section. Once launched, a new dashboard can be created by clicking the new dashboard icon, just a little plus sign. And then we can use the edit icon to edit an existing dashboard, or when we click on new dashboard, it's going to automatically go into the edit mode. So we're going to go to Tools, Dashboards, and then as soon as this opens up, we're going to see this new window, and we have the edit icon is active. Dashboard default name defaults to new dashboard, and the pencil icon is active. When we are in the editing mode, we can see exactly how everything is going to look, or we can click on the display mode, and that will take us into the actual display. We're going to drag and drop the components or the objects from the left to the dashboard background grid and drop it on the grid. We can expand our components, our parameters, our digital inputs and outputs, our calibrations, our math constants, our controller constants, anything that we want to put out there on that dashboard. We're going to drag it over from the left and drop it on the dashboard on the object, or we can drag it out and just drop it, and we'll change to a default object, and then we can change that in the settings that we will see over here on the right-hand side. These settings will vary based upon the selected component. For example, if I'm using a parameter that I want to look at, I have the ability to set the flag colors and set the graph minimum and max. I can change the gauge type. With the digitals, we're going to drop and drag those onto the workspace. The inputs are just going to give us a status, and as we can see here, they have the colored, the red LED looking icon. We also have outputs, which we are able to actually toggle. With the details of the inputs and the outputs, we can change what the colors are going to be. So if in my organization, green means it's off, I can switch that to so that red means it's on. I can also decide whether I want to see all of the caption information or if I want to create my own captions, maybe a custom caption. With the outputs, I can decide whether I want to have an open button only or a close button only, or do I want to have both of those? And I can also change the captions on those as well. We can also create a table, and a table is going to be a display of multiple intervals with multiple parameters. So we can see in this particular example, we've drug out our NOx, pounds, mm, our CO2, our CO high, and our load CT. And we have an instant variable or interval, a 15-minute interval, and a 1-hour interval. Now I can change all of those by using the settings on the right-hand side. I can change the order of what I'm looking at just by clicking on the component and dragging it up and dropping it, or dragging it down and dropping it where I want it. I can also add more intervals into this if I wanted to, just by dragging those intervals from the right, dropping them on the table. So here we've selected our table icon, drug it out and dropped it. We selected the intervals from the lower right-hand corner, drug them in and put them into the table. And now we're going to put our parameters in there and put the parameters in that we want to see in that particular piece. So available objects that you have for your dashboards, you have your gauges, number, analog, vertical gauges. You have a trending container where you can add a parameter in there to be trended. Our tables, our digital inputs and outputs. Again, the input is just going to show you a status. The output will show you, will offer you the ability to open or close. We can show our math constants on our dashboard. Math constants are just the K numbers that your system is going to use in its calculations and formulations. When it sees a K number, it's going to use that as part of the calculation. On the dashboard display, if we have the math constant out there, that's going to show us what the actual value is at that time. And then we can also manually update that constant from the dashboard if we choose to. Calibrations, any calibration that's in your system, you can drag it out and drop, and you'll have a start and stop and have the options to only have a start or only have a stop button, whatever you choose. A text box, and then finally a controller command, which is like the controller commands that we looked at in the console piece. There are several settings that are available to help you customize the dashboards. You can customize the actual dashboard itself for how often do you want it to update, what are the background colors, what is the height and the width of this particular dashboard. Expires is going to be a message that shows up if we didn't get any value for, say, our minute data in this example in 55 seconds, it would show as expired. And again, these settings are going to change corresponding with the object that you have selected. When we talk about parameters, we can change all of the captions. We can show the plant, server, source, all of this in the caption. We can add a custom caption. We can update the source, and we can update the interval that we're looking at. We would not be able to update the object name because that's going to be tied to the parameter. If we wanted to call our Unit 1 CO2 Peter Pan, we could put a custom caption in there, type Peter Pan in the type here to customize the caption text, and CO2 would then be called Peter Pan. With parameters, we have the flag availability, and these flags are going to come in and give us a particular colored background to our component. I can also share my flags over all of my components. So I get my dashboard built and I want to have all of my offline values showing with a blue background. I can go in there, find offline, check the box to enable it. And then in the color checkerboard, I can go and pick the blue color I want. And if that's the most important priority to me, that I want to see the blue colors, I can grab the 3 little vertical dots on the left and drag it to the desired priority. If we're working with the data controller, the settings for the controller command provides the captions option. And then which controller are we assigning this to? What is the image that we want to use for the button? Do we want to start or abort certain calibrations? Do we want to open or close different digitals? So you can see here the different settings that are available for everything that we are setting out there on our system. Here we can see the digital inputs. Do we want to change the colors for those? The plant, the caption, the server, the source, the gauge type, intervals, flags to display. And again, it's going to be dependent upon what the object is selected in the main toolbar. We have a standard editing toolbar. The toolbar is active in the editing mode. To switch to display mode from editing, we click the display icon. When in display mode, we're going to click the same icon to enter edit mode. And then the other options on the toolbar include save the current dashboard, save the changes that have been made to this particular dashboard, delete a selected item, copy or paste items, or change the ordering, bring to front, send to back, etc. All right, so what did we talk about today? Well, we created a view and dashboard. We began talking about what a view is and where they're applicable. We looked at the different feature areas where the views can be used. Next, we covered how to create or edit views in each of those areas. Then we talked about the consoles and how those are created and edited. And we closed it out with creating and editing dashboards. Now I'd like to take you into StackVision itself and show you exactly how those particular things are going to be used and how we're going to set those views. So here we have our StackVision. We've opened it up and I've logged in using administrative access, so I have full access to everything. If I need to manage the views that are associated with my system, I can go to Configuration, Views Administration, and then any view that's already associated in my system would be here on the left. And I can just select that particular view and I can change its ownership, or I can change it from a shared to a user-only view. Or if I need to get rid of this view because it no longer exists in my system, I can click the delete icon. I can copy and paste just like I could with my dashboards. And then I can also use these import and export icons over here when I've got a view that I want to export. Now I can't export anything right now because I have to save the changes that I had made. Now that I've saved the changes, I can import or export those particular views. If I want to create a view in CEMScape, I'm going to launch CEMScape, find the parameter I want to look at, and do a right click and select View in New Window. Now I can move these components around by just grabbing the component itself and moving it, or do the rubber banding where I just drag a box or my mouse down around everything, and everything that is in that blue box is considered rubber banded and is selected. Or I can hold my control key and select the different items that I want and just move those. Once I've got it arranged where I want it to be, I can click on my Save View icon or go to File, Save View. If I share it, everybody that has access to my system would then have access to that particular view. Now, when I come back into CEMScape, because I created that view, and there's the view there, webinar, that's the one I just created, and there's what we moved around on our screen. Now, if I want to create my own folder under this particular feature area, I select the feature area, I do a right click, add new folder, and I can drag that view in and drop it in the folder. Now, anytime you get yourself in a position in StackVision where you're lost or you forgot what to do, you can always click on the help icon, and the StackVision help is going to open up in the feature area that you happen to be working in. In this case, if I clicked on help, it's going to open up in CEMScape, and then I could just go to the creative view in CEMScape section, and it would give me detailed instructions. If I want to go into my DataLab or DataLab viewer to create a view, I can click on DataLab. It automatically goes over to the preference of the views that have already been created. But before I can create a view, I have to come over here and look at my parameters and decide which parameters I want to have in that particular view. My date and time range is going to default to typically yesterday's date, whatever yesterday's date might be. But down at the bottom of your screen, you see you have a use defaults. If I want to set my default dates and times so that that's always what's going to be used, I can put a check in the block. I can then type over the date that's already there. Or I can select from a calendar, clicking on my little calendar there. Or I can pick a predetermined period of time, which is going to be based off of my starting date. So I'm going to use the last quarter of 2022. That's not right. Now, when I launch my DataLab or my DataLab viewer, those are the dates that will be pulled in for my particular display. Now, I'm not locked into those default dates down there. Let's say, for example, I don't need to review the entire quarter's worth of data. I just need the first 2 weeks of October. Well, for my ending date here, I can then just go ahead and change that, and I have not messed up my default dates down at the bottom. If someone has turned off the default dates for you and you can't see them at the bottom of your screen, you can come up here to View and hide or show use defaults, or you can use Control F2. Even though you've set them and then turned them off, it's still going to be set. You've just turned off the display. Okay, so now I'm going to bring in my data. I would come over here to my parameters first, and I would make all my selections. And we're going to pretend I already did that. And here is my display for the data for that 2 weeks. So if I want to filter out my CO2 values, I can come in here and I can say, give me a custom filter and show me all of my CO2 values that were greater than or equal to 35. And I'm going to count those records because I need to know how many hours in that 2 weeks my CO2 went above 35. So I can go 1, 2, 3. No, no, no. Remember, we talked about the summary icons. I can add the summaries to all columns up here, or I can go to the individual columns and I can select what I want to see. So here I can say I have 186 hours during that 2 week period where my CO2 was above 35. Well, when my CO2 was above 35, what was the maximum NOx reading that I had? So I'll come to my NOx column and I'll say, show me the maximum. And we'll take it a step further and we'll turn on some colors here. And we don't have any colored backgrounds, but if I needed to change those, I could go ahead and change the color and the priority. For example, maybe out of control is more important to me than exceedances are. So I'm going to select my out of control and move it up to the top priority. All right, now that I've gotten my count down, I've gotten the maximum and the minimum value, I've applied colors if I had to, I'm going to turn on the reason and action codes for my CO2. I'm going to come up to parameters. Under CO2, I would go down to permit because that's where reason and action codes live, and turn them on just for my CO2. Now, if this is something I want to look at all the time and come back to it, I'll just click on my save view. I'll give it the view a name, and I'll either share it or make it a private view. Everything that I just did here in DataLab, I can also do in the DataLab viewer. If you have a view that is loaded up and you choose to export to Excel, again, it's WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. The only difference between what you're going to get on the screen versus the Excel export would be a checked column. It will say either true if it's checked or false if it's blank. Next, we have our consoles. So I'm going to click on my little home icon here. We'll go to consoles. And I'll come down to my console section and we'll load in a console. Now, if I go into the designer, the console designer, I can load up the very same thing. And now I have the ability to move things around and change the way things look or add or take away just by coming over here to my objects. And if I wanted to add a new reading and go ahead in and select my value that I want to see, open up my parameters, drag it out and drop it. Now, if I want to fancy the way this looks, I come over here to my details, and then I can make all the applicable changes. And then finally, we had our dashboards. So I go to Tools, Dashboards. It's going to open up in that separate window for me. Drag it over for you. And here is my dashboards. Defaults to new dashboard is the name. If I want to add another dashboard, or I can go into the edit mode and just edit this particular one. I can drag my fields out or my components out, or I can come down here under the parameters and drag them out. If I want to change my gauges, I can change. Here's an analog gauge. Again, I'll just grab my parameters and drag them out, drop them in there. Now over on the right-hand side, I have the details that are associated with that. It's going to be associated with my Unit 1 CO2, but I'm going to get rid of this stuff and I'm going to use a custom caption and we're going to call it Peter Pan. Even though I'm calling it Peter Pan, it's still going to be tied to the CO2 values. If I want to change the way the gauge looks now, I can come down here and I can go to, show me a vertical gauge. I also have my flags. And when I have my flags, again, I can change the colors. And I can also share those flags against all the parameters that are on my particular screen. If I need to change the priority, I'm just going to hover over the three vertical dots, and I'm just going to drag that up or drag it down to wherever I want it to be. The only flags that you cannot share in the dashboard is going to be your alert and your warning limits, because that's going to be different for each of your parameters. Okay, so I can come in here and I can say warning, and I can say what I want that warning value to be. So maybe since this is 18 to 20, I'll say 15, give me a warning. And at 18, give me an alert. So I know when it gets up there into the red, I got some issues. All right, those are examples of my gauges. Here's my trending container. I can drag my box over and drop it. And then I can grab the parameters that I want to trend and drag those in and drop those in. Now, with the dashboards, you can only have one interval as the trend. You can have as many parameters in there as you want just by dragging them over and dropping them on there, but you can only have one interval. You can change the history that you want to look at. Maybe I want to look at my 15-minute averages, and I want to look at my last 8 to look at the last 2 hours worth of averages, and that's what would show up on my grid. My table, drag that out and drop it. Let me get rid of my trending container so that you can see that. And what I'm going to do with my table is I'm going to drag my parameter or my values over. I want to see my 1-minute data. I want to see my 15-minute data. And I want to see my 1-hour data. I'm not going to look at instant, so I'll just click on the X there and get rid of that. Now I have to put the parameters in that I want. So I drag my CO2 over and drop it. I grab my fuel factor over and drop it. I grab my NOx high and drop it. And we'll put another NOx high in there. But I don't want my CO2 up here at the top, so I'm just going to click on it and drag it to where I want it and drop it. My inputs and outputs, again, my inputs are just going to be a status. So I would see the red button there once I pull in one of my inputs. Or I could have just came down here to inputs and drug it out and dropped it, and it would do the same thing. Whatever works best for you. I've seen some folks, what they do is with their inputs is they don't have the caption shown. They have just a little red dot or green dot, and they put their own caption in there. I saw one site that they use red, yellow, and green icons for their calibrations. Green means they passed, red means they failed, and yellow means that they were in the maintenance limit. So it just depends on how you want to create your system and set your system up. With your outputs, you can go ahead and bring in the actual output that you want to toggle. So down here to my digitals, go to 36 for flame detected. And put that out there. My K values, again, these values can change depending upon maybe you've got K6 is associated with your fuel factor or your heat input or GCV of your fuel. Well, you can drag that out there so that whenever you looked at your console, you would see that. You also have the ability to say that we can edit it from our dashboard if we wanted to do that. The calibrations, we can drag our calibrations out and drop them. Or again, we can just drag our calibration object down and then put that in there. With your text box, you really don't have a lot of options with your text box. You do have the ability to change the orientation, change the weight from bold or not, italics to be in the middle of the text box, the top of the text, the bottom of the text. You can change your color, but you cannot change the text itself or the font itself. The only way that you're going to make the text size different is by dragging or stretching or shrinking that. But I can change my text color. I can change my background color. And as I drag that around, it gets bigger or smaller as I shrink it down. And then finally, my controller commands. Drag out my controller command when I drop it. What do I want this to do? Well, maybe I want this to be associated with my calibrations. So we'll drop a calibration in there. We'll come over here and say calibration sequences to start and just open that and drop it in. Again, it just depends on what we want to do with our particular system. All right, so if I wanted to see the display on my dashboard, I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to click on my little monitor icon or display icon, and that's going to show me what the dashboard would look like every time we run it. Here's an example of a dashboard that we built earlier. Okay, we've got our math constant out there. We've got some numerical values. We've got an analog gauge. We have a linear gauge. We have our table, a text box. And again, any of these can be set up to launch as soon as a user logs into the system. When we go to user accounts, we can see that we have startup applications and views. So for my friend Pat, when Pat logs in, it's going to go right to the dashboards, and the dashboard it's going to load in is the HFTDB. So let's just look and see what that is. HFTDB right there. And there's that dashboard that's going to load up whenever Pat logs into the system. So you're only limited by what it is that your own creation and imagination can do. So with that, I'll close out my presentation and open it up for any questions that you might have.
Feel free to place any questions you have on the panel on the right-hand side of your screen.
The little chat window is what Taylor is referring to. If it is not expanded, just go ahead and click on that little down arrow and it will open it up and you'll be able to type in there.
So far, it doesn't seem like we have any questions right now. Looks like you covered the concept pretty well.
All right.
Oh, here we go. What is the difference between a console and a dashboard?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked that. The console and the dashboard principle are going to be the same, where they're both going to do the same thing as showing the displays and the real-time values and things like that, and have commands where you can toggle things. The difference in them is consoles are the legacy product, and they will eventually be going away. Not sure when, but we'll give you plenty of notice to let you know that the consoles are going to go away. Dashboards are the wave of the future, and those are going to replace the consoles. So I'm recommending folks now that are getting their new systems, they build dashboards rather than consoles. That's the only difference. But as far as functioning and the availability, there's not any difference. They're both there. Dashboards are going to refresh what it needs to refresh. Consoles are going to refresh the entire display. So it can be a bit of a memory hog. I hope that answered it for you.
This webinar will be available to view later. I believe 24 hours from now, you'll receive an email to a link to a recording, but this will also be uploaded onto our customer community platform within the next week. Are there any other questions?
All right. Thank you very much, Taylor, for helping out this morning. And thank you all for being part of our webinar. Looking forward to seeing you again. Till then, it's Mark. Talk to you later.
Thank y'all, everyone.